Here's a little island in the middle of a park, and this park is the Herbert Park in Dublin near Bowles Bridge. Now what's interesting about this little island is if you look inside it, and it's autumn at this time of when you see it, but if you look into the island you see the usual ducks like the mallard. We also see some strange little birds perched on the ramp, which birds use to get onto the island. But what are these strange birds? They're very drab. They were actually they were born and raised on the island, and I saw them a few weeks earlier, actually a few months earlier in August. And this is them in August during the summer, and it was a very good summer. And these little birds are in fact moorhen, and there were 4 of them, and they're little tiny furry chicks, all black, and they have a sort of a red beak. When they get older as fully grown moorhen, they have red beaks. They have enormous feet because they're kind of a lily trotter type of a bird that actually walks on water vegetation. And you see they need wide feet so they don't sink into the ground or sink into the marshy ground or the water. They can actually keep their balance on the weeds. And you can see there are 4 of them, and they're walking along the edge of the island. And they're having a look down the water. Where's our mother gone, or our father? Are they bringing us food? See, at this stage they have to live on land. There are fish in this lake. It's not a man-made lake exactly. It's concreted, but it was in fact a natural lake before that, and it's right beside the River Dodder. And the Dodder provides the water that fills the lake. But there are some dangers. There are herring gulls, herons, and of course there are some unusual ones now, such as the red-eared terrapins, the red-eared sliders, which have been introduced. They can't breed, but they were let go into the Dodder, and so I've seen them in the lake as well, and they would eat a small bird. Now here's the adult moorhen walking along with the chicks in the undergrowth, and it's like a jungle on an island, but people can't get onto it and unless they wade, and dogs won't go onto it. Although I suppose a golden retriever could jump in and attempt to swim for it, but they never do. And there's only one ramp for them to get onto the island and off, and the birds just use that. And it's a great place for them to nest. You can see here on the pathway there's black-headed gulls that's the winter plumage. A few weeks later you can actually, I came by and I was surprised to see that the little chicks had taken to the water. There were 2 of them with their mother. I wondered at this stage if the other 2 had been predated, but I was happy later on to find out that wasn't the case, that the 2 were just on the island. I think one parent had 2 of them and another parent had the other 2. And they're learning here how to forage. And you'll notice that the parent has a very bright red bill and a yellow tip on it, and that the chicks kind of have it as well. It seems to have some communication importance, because if you notice when they were the older birds standing on the ramp, they didn't have that bright colour on their bill, that the chicks didn't anymore. And watch this little chick here swimming over to its mother or its father, and watch, it taps the yellow on the end of the bill. And that has some sort of significance of communication, asking for food, and it usually gets the food. Now the interesting thing about these birds is that they feed in a different way. They wouldn't be like gulls. They can't eat bread, and they don't come over when bread has been given out. People come to the park and they will give little, breadcrumbs and things like that, or special food for birds. But these birds don't actually come along with the gulls and the pigeons. And here you can see this one totally able to swim now. Those giant feet, of course, are like huge horse, and it knows what it's doing. It's able to find, it's eating plankton, I think, at this stage, and algae. But you can see the bills they have are actually the bills of insectivores. They're more of a hunter's bill, whereas ducks have sort of wide platform bills because they eat vegetation. These birds catch small insects, and that'd be aquatic insects and the other kinds that would be like any flying insects that might fall onto the surface, or in fact you get spiders that will of course run across surfaces. And now at this stage, a few weeks later, I saw there were only 3 of them, but they were almost fully grown. one of them must have been predated, or it could have died for a number of reasons. It could have had an accident or anything. It could even have been collected by some member of the public and taken away, wrongly assuming it was lost or something. You can see the moorhen. The interesting thing about moorhen is, in the wild, out in the countryside, it's almost impossible to get near them. It's almost impossible to see them. Whereas in a city park, they're very calm. They're used to people and even to dogs. They know how things work. They know where they're safe and where they're not safe. Here you can see the adult is actually bathing. Although they're a water bird, they usually just sit on the water, but they have to bathe as well, like other birds, and clean their feathers. And you'll notice, you can see under the water, the adult has very big feet as well. And here they are, much later, and they're much bigger, and they're turning black. And next spring, you can see there's the adult, and it has the bright red bill with the yellow tip. But these other birds are almost as big, but they've lost the colours off their bill. They presumably don't need to communicate for food the same way, because they can hunt themselves, but they still stay close to their parents. They are lovely little birds. And this one here is jumping into the water. You can see it can fly and swim around. It's very drab looking by comparison. It hasn't got the bright red bill, but look, watch. This was only a lot later, but look, it's able to fly. And what's it eating though? Because I thought, God, they don't come for bread, and this one is coming over to where the bread usually isn't. Is it eating bread, or what, has somebody put something else out? Or is it even trying to get chewing gum off the concrete? Because sometimes you do, unfortunately, see chewing gum stuck to concrete, and maybe they've developed some crazy taste for chewing gum. Now this bird, you can see, is fully grown, but it hasn't got the colours of an adult moorhen. So it will turn black over winter, and when spring comes along, it should be very black, and it'll have the bright red bill. It'll gradually get the bright red bill, and then the yellow tip. And when it gets to breeding season, they breed quite late though compared to a lot of birds. But of course they could, they invest a lot more energy in reproducing. They look after their chicks, raise them. I mean, that these chicks, despite being fully grown, will still hang around with the parents. Now it's looking for something, but what is it looking for? This had me completely perplexed, and it was getting closer to me. And then I suddenly realized, so I hope you're not eating right now. If you are, just maybe stop playing this and take a break, because it's actually eating bird dung. So it may be that, say, gulls, such as black-headed gulls or herring gulls, or even the pigeons, they're eating foods that these moorhen can't eat. But once they've digested those foods and passed them out, these moorhen are able to actually eat or get something out of the excrement, which is, takes away maybe some of their something from their mystique. But at the same time, it is fascinating that these things do happen. I mean, let's put it this way: if birds like this weren't doing that, what, all the dung would be just mounting up. But they're actually taking away the dung. They and the park attendants with power hoses. Otherwise, the whole area would be covered in guano. But it's very interesting because it's not something I have ever seen, and it's not something I ever knew about. I'm not sure if anybody knows much about this sort of behaviour. But you can see it's actively searching for bird dung to eat. And insects, I assume. It's fascinating. And you can see the feet are going the green colour now. The adults are going to have really green feet, very bright green when they breed. And when this bird gets its breeding colours in spring, it'll have really bright green legs, and it'll have a very bright red beak and a big yellow patch on the bottom of the lower bill and at the tip of the upper bill. And they are very beautiful birds, very unusual and funny.